Hello guys, this is your friend Itachi Fanfic 3.0 and we are back a new fanfic story which is what if the valley chose Naruto as heir and rejected every other destiny waiting for him? Part 1. Let's start fanfic without wasting more time. The great beast had always been a shadow on the horizon of the world. Its tail spiraled through legend, carving fear into every age that dared remember. And on the night the crimson winds rose again, it returned, not as a destroyer, but as a signal. A signal that the old war, buried under generations of blood and stubborn peace, was no longer content to sleep. The world now stood on a fragile edge, held together only by uneasy agreements and tired heroes who had carried too much for too long. From villages and clans that once sought each other's downfall came young warriors, each trained under scars inherited from people they never knew, fighting for futures they didn't yet understand. This story begins not with harmony, but with collision. A collision of legacies. A collision of destinies. A collision of hearts that had never healed. At the center of this world, two young warriors walked paths destined to intertwine. One carried a fiery resolve that refused to die, no matter how many times the world tried to crush it. The other carried a silence sharper than any blade, built from loss, betrayal, and the cruel expectation that strength demanded isolation. Their differences made them move like opposite forces, yet their similarities tethered them tighter than they realized. But they were not the only ones the world relied on. Across mountains carved by ancient jutsu, masters who once shook nations watched the new generation rise. They saw shadows repeat themselves. They saw old mistakes tighten their circles. And they knew this time would demand more than power. It would demand sacrifice that would rewrite what it meant to protect. The great-tailed beast sensed this shift even before humans did. Its breath heated the sky. Its presence bent the air. And yet, beneath its monstrous form existed a truth no one had ever bothered to understand. It did not wish to destroy the world. It wished to test it. To see whether humans, who always spoke of unity, would stand together when the foundation of their beliefs trembled. The first tremor arrived quietly. An ancient entity awakened inside the mind of a man who had defeated death once before. His heart had grown weary. His ideals had long blurred into disappointment. And in that moment of vulnerability, the sleeping darkness found its voice, a voice that promised a return to a world where pain could finally be erased so long as freedom was surrendered. He accepted. In accepting, he unleashed a storm that spread across the nations, twisting loyalties, corrupting warriors, shattering bonds once thought unbreakable. Some vanished into the night, drawn by the lure of power. Some stayed, desperate to protect lands already trembling. Some hesitated, unable to decide whether the world was worth saving or tearing apart. Through this rising tide of chaos, the young blonde warrior stepped forward. Though his past was filled with loneliness, he still believed stubbornly that every person, no matter how lost, deserved a chance to be pulled back. His determination wasn't a loud one anymore. It had matured into something quieter, heavier, shaped by responsibility and understanding. He carried the weight of countless expectations, yet still, he walked with the simple conviction that no one should die alone. Beside him stood the dark-haired prodigy, whose silence masked years of grief. He had returned from the brink of self-destruction only because the blonde warrior had refused to give up on him. Even now, he never said gratitude aloud. But he walked by his side. And that was enough to speak truths he couldn't voice. Their alliance was fragile, but honest. The coming storm would test it. When whispers of the awakened darkness spread through the land, villages gathered their greatest warriors. The old master with white hair, burdened by years of wandering, accepted that the next fight might be his last. The silver-haired teacher, carrying sins he had never absolved, prepared to guide his students through shadows he wished they never had to see. The red-haired guardian of the desert vowed that this time, he would protect instead of destroy. Others rose beside them, each driven by different memories, different regrets, different hopes. The beast watched them gather beneath its burning gaze. And then the world shifted. A new enemy emerged from nothingness, an army stitched together not by loyalty, but by stolen will. The darkness controlling them reached deep into the memories of the living, pulling out every regret, every fear, every wound. It weaponized heartbreak. It sharpened guilt. It unleashed illusions cruel enough to tear apart even the strongest minds. Villages fell into chaos. Bonds cracked under pressure. And every warrior found themselves fighting not just enemies, but shadows of their own past. Through this rising destruction, the blonde and dark-haired warriors pushed forward, refusing to break. They faced illusions of people they had lost. They relived mistakes they wished to forget. They confronted versions of themselves twisted by rage and despair. And in every moment of weakness, they found strength not in power, but in each other. But the darkness was not done. It wanted proof. Proof that humanity's strongest bonds could snap under enough pressure. And so it targeted the one bond it feared the most, the one between the blonde warrior and the silent prodigy. The world trembled when the prodigy was struck down. The blonde warrior caught him before he fell, his hands trembling as he felt the warmth of life slipping away. The prodigy's breath became faint. His heartbeat faltered. His voice cracked like a dying flame. He whispered only one thing. "You cannot save everyone." But the blonde warrior refused to accept it. He carried him through fire, through illusions, through enemies that wanted to finish the job. And each step carved deeper lines of determination across his face. No prophecy, no curse, no darkness would take this one person from him. The beast watched him from afar. And in the warrior's grief-stricken rage, it saw something it had never seen in any human before, an unbreakable refusal to surrender even when destiny demanded it. The beast roared. The world shook. The darkness trembled. A new power began to awaken. A power born not from hatred, but from devotion. His eyes changed. His aura shifted. And in that moment, the blonde warrior crossed a threshold that no human had ever crossed. Not for glory, not for vengeance, but for someone he could not bear to lose. The first chapter of this war, this long, merciless war, closed with a single truth ringing across the shattered battlefield. Heroes are not born. They are chosen by the wounds they refuse to let define them. And the blonde warrior had just chosen his path. A path soaked in love, fury, loyalty, and sacrifice. A path that would change the fate of every nation. A path that would not let the prodigy die. Not now. Not ever. The battlefield lay in ruins long after the echoes of power had faded. Ash drifted like dying snowflakes. The ground trembled with the memory of the beast's roar and the whispers of 1,000 shattered illusions. The world had expected chaos, but not this silence, this vast, suffocating silence where destinies had been ripped open. In the center of this devastation stood the blonde warrior, his breath uneven, his eyes burning with that new, unnatural light. The unconscious prodigy rested against his chest, his body limp but warm enough to prove he was still alive. The blonde warrior's hands shook, not from exhaustion, but from the unbearable thought that if he had been a second slower, the person he trusted most would have vanished forever. He could not allow that. Not now. Not in this lifetime. What frightened the world was not the destruction of the beast behind them, it was the expression on the blonde warrior's face. His grief no longer burned like fire. It had crystallized into something colder, sharper, more terrifying. He did not shout. He did not cry. He simply stared into the distance with a clarity that could break even the strongest heart. The elders watching from afar felt their breath catch. They recognized that look. It was the look of a man who had made an irreversible decision. The darkness that manipulated the world had awakened countless threats, but none more dangerous than a hero pushed beyond his breaking point. The blonde warrior took one step forward, then another. His legs trembled, but he did not slow. The prodigy's weight felt heavier with every passing moment, not because his body was weakening, but because the blonde warrior had begun to understand the deeper truth. The enemy was not trying to win the war. The enemy was trying to break the bond between them. Because if that bond broke, the world would break with it. Far behind them, the beast lifted its massive head, sensing the shift again. It had watched humanity for centuries and had never understood their unyielding nature. But this boy, this blonde boy, was rewriting everything. His determination was no longer a childish declaration. It was a force capable of reshaping the very rules of existence. Yet power born from love could become as destructive as any hatred. And the world knew this. The blonde warrior reached the remnants of an ancient corridor, the last standing structure within the collapsed battlefield. It had once belonged to a forgotten civilization, one that believed emotions could rewrite destiny. Though ruined now, its walls still pulsed with dormant energy. The warrior laid the prodigy gently on a broken stone altar, his fingers lingering for a moment longer than necessary. For a heartbeat, he allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. He stared at the prodigy's face, blood tracing the lines of a life filled with scars, pain, and unspoken loyalty. The warrior brushed away a strand of dark hair from the boy's forehead, his voice shaking with a quiet intensity. "You're not leaving me. Not like this. Not ever again." There was no reply, only the faint rise and fall of the prodigy's chest. Suddenly, a presence approached from the shadows. The silver-haired mentor. He had sprinted across the broken battlefield when he sensed the surge of power earlier. Now, as he approached the blonde warrior, his breath caught in his throat. The warrior's eyes, those altered, rippling eyes, held both unimaginable potential and unimaginable danger. They were not eyes meant for mortals. They were eyes that had witnessed the edge of life and refused to step back. The mentor placed a trembling hand on the blonde boy's shoulder. "You can't carry this alone." The warrior didn't turn. "I already am." "You'll lose yourself," the mentor warned softly. "I'll lose him if I stop," the warrior replied, his voice low but steady. The mentor did not argue further. He simply knelt beside them, placing a gentle hand over the prodigy's. He understood the depth of this bond more than anyone else. He had watched it form through battles, mistakes, forgiveness, and growth. He had seen how these two had rebuilt each other in ways words could never capture. But he also understood the danger. Love as powerful as this could become a weapon. Before he could speak again, the ground trembled. A faint pulse stretched across the sky. The shadows shifted unnaturally. The darkness that had awakened the enemy was still lingering, searching, adapting. It could sense the blonde warrior's awakening power, and it feared him. Not because he was strong, but because he was unpredictable. The enemy knew that to defeat him, it had to strike where he was weakest. And that meant striking again at the one person whose loss he could not survive. Miles away, unnoticed by the recovering heroes, shadows gathered into a single form. A figure cloaked in darkness stepped out of nothing, his presence bending the air around him. His eyes glowed with cold calculation. He had seen the blonde warrior's transformation. He had felt the shift in the world. And he knew that if he waited too long, this boy would rise into something unstoppable. He whispered to the void. "The key is not breaking the world. The key is breaking him." The shadows moved like living smoke, spreading across the land in search of their next target. And as they moved, the prodigy's fingers twitched slightly, a sign of life, a weak protest against the darkness creeping ever closer. Back at the ancient corridor, the blonde warrior felt it. He felt the enemy searching. He felt the world leaning toward collapse. And he understood something with chilling clarity. Every battle until now had been preparation. Every pain had been a warning. Every loss had been shaping him for this moment. He stood slowly, the air bending around him. The mentor watched with worry. You need rest. The blonde warrior shook his head. What I need is time. And the world won't give it to me. He looked down at the prodigy. His expression softened only for him. Stay alive until I get back. That's all I'm asking. The mentor stepped forward. You're not going alone. The blonde warrior finally turned, his new eyes glowing faintly. I have to. If they see you, they'll go after everyone. If they see me, they'll come straight for me. And that's what I want. He wasn't being reckless. He wasn't being arrogant. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was bait. Bait for an enemy that had no idea how far he was willing to go. He clenched his fist, feeling the new power coursing through him. Raw, unstable, terrifying. A power born from devotion. Born from grief. Born from the refusal to let fate decide anything ever again. Then, without another word, he walked into the collapsing horizon. Each step was a promise. A promise to rewrite destiny. A promise to protect what mattered. A promise to challenge the darkness that believed it understood humanity. The world watched him go. The beast watched him go. And somewhere, beyond the veil of illusions and corrupted warriors, the enemy waited, smiling at the idea of the coming collision. Because he believed all humans could break. He simply hadn't met the one human who wouldn't. And thus, the second chapter of this endless war began. Not with light, not with peace, but with a single warrior who refused to let the world take the one person who gave him purpose. A storm was coming. A storm shaped not by hatred, but by love fierce enough to burn through destiny itself. The world shifted as the blonde warrior walked into the ruins of the horizon. Nothing about the landscape felt familiar anymore. The sky had thinned into a gray expanse, as if it too was holding its breath. The earth beneath his feet pulsed faintly, trembling with remnants of the darkness that had swept through. It felt as though the world was watching him, waiting, judging, anticipating what this newly awakened force would choose to become. His steps were steady, but inside him a storm churned. Every beat of his heart echoed with the image of the prodigy collapsing in his arms. Every breath replayed the tremor of the boy's fading pulse. His mind repeated the same vow, not whispered, not spoken, but carved deep enough into his soul that even death would not erase it. No matter what price he had to pay, he would protect him. In the distance, shadows crawled across the broken landscape like ink spilling through cracks. They slithered without sound or form, spreading wider, multiplying. They were searching for him. The darkness knew the boy had awakened something unpredictable, something dangerous. It knew that if it did not break him now, it might never get the chance again. The blonde warrior welcomed them. He could feel their cold attention turning toward him from miles away. Good, he thought. Look at me. Chase me. Leave him alone. The world twisted around him as he reached an abandoned valley carved by ancient war, its jagged cliffs stained with the memory of forgotten battles. Windless, voiceless, still. The perfect place for the enemy to reveal itself. He stopped walking. The shadows stopped moving. A stillness heavier than silence settled around him. Then, from the center of the darkness, a figure emerged, slowly, deliberately, as though savoring every second of his arrival. It wore a cloak woven from shifting smoke, and its eyes glowed with an emotion that wasn't rage or hatred, but amusement. You came alone, the figure said, its voice smooth and cold. How predictable. The blonde warrior's eyes glowed faintly. You were looking for me. I was looking for weakness, the figure corrected. And I found it lying in your arms. The warrior's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. You don't get to speak about him. The figure tilted its head, studying him. You carry power no human should possess. But power born from attachment always rots. It makes you reckless. It makes you blind. And in the end, it smiled. It ruins you. The warrior didn't step back. If you understood love, you'd know it's the one thing that doesn't break. Love. The figure laughed softly. Is that what you call that boy? A wound you refuse to let heal. A memory you wrap chains around. Love is not your strength. It is your cage. He shook his head. You're wrong. The figure raised a hand. Shadows twisted into sharp, spiraling blades. Then let us test the truth. Let us see whether your love can keep you alive. Before the warrior could react, the shadows lunged. But he didn't flinch. His eyes shifted. Those rippling, awakened eyes that held an entire storm within them. As the shadows struck, they warped and shattered against the invisible force radiating from him. The backlash tore through the valley, splitting stone, bending the air. The figure paused, surprised. You've changed. No, the warrior said quietly. I've decided. Shadows wrapped around the figure again, this time more violently, but the warrior stepped through them like stepping through mist. His steps were too calm, his expression too controlled. He wasn't fighting with anger. He wasn't fighting with fear. He was fighting with purpose. The figure tried again, summoning illusions, visions of the prodigy dying, disappearing, turning against him. But the warrior simply walked forward, indifferent to the phantoms clawing at him. You can't break me, he said, voice steady. Not anymore. The figure's calm cracked. You think yourself invincible. You think pain won't touch you. Pain already touched me, he answered. And it chose the wrong person. The ground shook as two opposing forces collided, the warrior's overwhelming will and the enemy's endless shadows. The valley twisted, the sky fractured, and every illusion the enemy created began crumbling under the weight of the warrior's resolve. He was different now. He wasn't fighting to protect the world. He wasn't fighting for glory, destiny, or expectation. He was fighting for one person. And that made him unstoppable. The figure stepped back involuntarily. That bond will destroy you, it whispered, as if trying to convince itself. That boy will be your downfall. The warrior's eyes hardened. That boy is the reason I'm still standing. The enemy lost patience. Shadows surged. The world dimmed. A force unlike any before stabbed into his chest. Not physically, but deeper, into the threads of his spirit. The figure was not attacking his body. It was attacking his memory, his heart, the very connection he fought to protect. Images flickered. Moments with the prodigy, battles fought together, grudges forgiven, trust rebuilt. The enemy clawed at every thread linking them. Trying to rip it apart. Trying to tear the bond that gave the warrior strength. But the warrior held on. His body shook. His breath faltered. But he held on. Because he remembered a time when that prodigy had walked alone, carrying burdens too heavy for one person. He remembered the silent apologies in the boy's eyes, the quiet loyalty in his steps, the unspoken, "Don't leave me," he never dared to voice. And he remembered how much he refused to lose that. He whispered, almost too soft to hear, "I won't let you take him." The enemy snarled. Why? Why cling so desperately to one life? You could save the world with that power, and yet you waste it on a single boy. The warrior looked up slowly, his expression like a rising storm. He saved me first. The enemy froze. And that hesitation was enough. Power erupted. The valley shattered. The shadows burned away. The enemy was thrown back, skidding across the ruined ground, its cloak torn, its composure cracked. The warrior stood at the center of the destruction, his aura bending the air. The enemy stared at him. No longer amused. Now afraid. You are not human, it whispered. The warrior stepped forward. I'm the reason you won't win. But just as he prepared to finish it, a sudden, violent pulse tore through the world. The enemy's eyes widened. It seems, the figure smiled weakly, your friend has awakened. The warrior's heart froze. He felt it. Faint, unsteady, painful. But alive. The prodigy was moving. Somewhere far away. Injured, vulnerable, but refusing to die. The warrior's breath stilled. The enemy's smile widened. Let's see if your devotion still holds, when the one you fight for is hunted again. The shadows vanished. The enemy disappeared with them. And without a moment's hesitation, the blonde warrior turned. And ran. Ran with a desperation carved from love, fear, and fury.